Welcome back to our next video in the series on LiDAR visualization with open source software. If you've been following my guide so far, in the first video I covered some of the basic softwares and plugins that you'll need to download to do this type of visualization. Then we covered where to find data, how to download it, how to manipulate it in Cloud Compare. And then in the previous video, we finally made some raster products from the LiDAR. So in this video, we're going to cover manipulating and using our raster products to find archeological or topographical features. So this video is really where it all kind of comes together and your work really starts to pay off. If you've hung in this far and struggled through it like I did whenever I was figuring this out years ago, this video is where it's going to start to pay off. So first we'll start with our digital elevation model that we produced in the previous video. You'll notice here these are all permanent layers now. Like I said in the last video, I saved all of these. I exported them and saved them and have them in the project now. So these are saved, these are permanent, and I can use them, manipulate them, and do whatever. If I close this project and reopen it, they'll still be there, which if they were temporary layers like they were in the last video, once you close the project, they are gone. You'll have to recalculate them. So we'll start with the digital elevation model, the DEM. You can see it here. The default is to render it in single band grayscale. And so you can see this, I've got this range of values here. That's my max elevation, my minimum. So this is going to stretch from black to white. So black is lower elevation, white is higher elevation. And this in and of itself isn't particularly useful to us. So the LiDAR pictures, as I hear them called online a lot, what that usually was showing is a hillshade. So a hillshade is just it's kind of like a cheat code to visualize this in 3D. It uses a formula to calculate reflectance based on an angle and sun direction, and kind of manages to give us a 3D looking surface of the data we're working with. So I'm going to walk you through how I would manipulate this to start searching for and identifying possible archaeological features. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to switch this from single band gray to a hillshade. So I've got my layer selected. I could also select it up here in the layer styling panel. And we're going to change this to hillshade. So these are the default settings. You can see how we've gone to this wonderful 3D looking representation of the Earth's surface. And when we were talking about resolution earlier, you'll notice if I zoom in, these are all tiny pixels. They're little squares. And if I use my measure tool here, let's see here, it's in meters. Let's just pick one of these and we'll measure about across. And it's about a half meter. It's actually exactly a half meter because that's the resolution of our raster. So you can imagine this half meter by half meter is the dimensions of each pixel of elevation data. And each pixel, the shade of it in that previous representation represented an elevation. So we'll go ahead and close out of that. So I find this view to be kind of annoying because it puts these frames around the picture. You get these lines. It looks really grainy. We zoom way in. So how can we improve this? So I'm going to go through some of my basic settings that I change pretty much all the time to be able to view this. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to scroll down our layer styling panel. We're going to turn early resampling on. And let me zoom in here so you can see what that does. All right, that really didn't do anything yet. But what happens if we change our resampling method from nearest neighbor? We're going to choose cubic. You've got a lot of different options here. You don't have all these options unless you turn on early resampling. Bilinear is fine. I'm just going to choose cubic. Let me zoom in a little more and watch what happens now. I change this to cubic. So you can see that's a pretty significant improvement whenever you're trying to pick out details on the landscape. let's see here. What are some other settings I can do? All right, so we'll start to cover this. So a hillshade, the cool thing about this, what sets this apart from like CalTopo or even just some hillshade viewer on USGS or whatever, is that it's going to have a set sun direction. But we can manipulate the direction of the sun, which is this azimuth here. That's the direction the sun is coming from. So you can see this dot here in the sun. That's indicating that the sun is coming from the northwest and going to the southeast. And then altitude, which represents the angle in the sky. So 90 degrees would be the sun is perfectly horizontal, casting shadows across the landscape. And here's an example of that. Yeah, really dark, can't really see much. And 0, which would be the sun directly overhead. Wow, that's really bright, can't really see much. So the default is 45. We can stick with that for now. We'll play with that later, as well as the sun direction. An important thing to that you'll notice here, for whatever reason, the human brain comprehends sunlight should be coming from above the top quadrant of the screen, and specifically the upper left, which is really interesting actually. You can do some reading on this and why exactly this is. It's just how our brains are wired. So you notice if I switch the direction of the sun to one of these lower quadrants, specifically opposite, so the lower right, everything looks inverted. So this is a creek, this is a river, and it looks like this creek is sticking up out of the ground now instead of going down into it. And one of the reasons I find this so fascinating is if you're in the northern hemisphere, a sun direction from this upper left is actually impossible. That's not where our sun comes from. But you can use this illusion sometimes to help you pick out features that you wouldn't normally have seen. Like you can see here, this is actually a road network or old paths, really stands out whenever I do this. So I'll swap back and forth sometimes. You can see it here as well, but I swap back and forth sometimes whenever I'm trying to pick out some little details, and it can just really help you out. So the way I usually start to interpret this is if there's a place with something of interest, people had to get to it. So that means either a path or a road. So you can see I've got some roads leading up through here. A lot of road network in here. Some of this is modern, like Jeep trail, four-wheeler trail kind of deal, which is pretty common. We've got roads coming through here. This is some modern development. But you can kind of start to see that. So where do roads, if a road goes to a point and ends, is that just a dead end in the road, or is there something at the end of that road? If roads converge on a spot or go around something, does that mean there was something there? So in this case, I had a little historical knowledge from a map from the 1820s that there was an old lead smelter located a few hundred yards downstream from a prominent igneous knob, which you can see that here on the LiDAR. I know this because I've been there, and also from geologic maps. So I just measured out downstream and kind of started looking. And one thing that really jumps out to me right away is this depression here. So we're going to zoom in here. I'm kind of going to play around with the settings and maybe see if we can see something. All right, so zooming in. First thing I noticed, this depression is pretty prominent, and there's another finer depression right here, and maybe the hint of a line here and possibly here. So we're going to play with our settings now and see if we can't manipulate this so we can maybe see if we can get a more clear outline, see if there's anything going on here. So I kind of played around with this earlier today. I'll do it here somewhat real time, but I did record my settings to make this a little bit easier. So you can see as I move the sun around, it's casting shadows across the landscape. Ooh, right there, I'm starting to see it. So we're seeing maybe a line, some linear features here on three sides with these two depressions in the corner. So we're starting to see it there. And I tend to try and cast the light. If I cast it this direction, I'm seeing a linear feature here and here, but the light is running down this depression or rise here. And so I'm not really seeing any linear feature here. If I put the light source, we'll say at a corner, maybe like right there. So now it's casting at an angle to this structure here. So I think we'll settle, go a little more, somewhere around 280. There we go, 280. So now in this orientation, I'm seeing a side here, a side here, a side here, maybe a faint side here, as well as these two depressions in the corner. So now we want to try and make this pop a little bit more. And so to do that, we're going to play around with our, we'll play around with our sun altitude as well. So right now we're at 45 degrees. The sun is shining at a 45-degree angle. A lot of times if you cast light at a lower angle on the landscape, the shadows it casts are longer. It might make things pop a little more. So you can play around with this number and increase it or decrease it with some clicks over here, or I can just type in a number that I've previously determined is pretty good. You'll notice as this number gets higher, as we get closer to perfectly horizontal, it's going to get darker. So there is kind of a limit there. If I turn this up to 90, perfectly horizontal, it's pretty dark. Can't really see super great. So we're going to leave that at 65. The next thing we're going to play around with is the Z factor. So this Z factor is basically it's going to multiply times the elevation by that factor. So we're by turning that number at 1 is no amplification, and increasing it higher, like if I do a value of 2 here, it's going to exaggerate. I'm going to have a vertical exaggeration of 2. And so you can see now this is quite a bit more prominent. I can see a side here, a side here. There's a corner. I'm picking up the corner now. A side here and another side. And then the depressions really stand out. You can see our roads coming in. And so I've investigated this on the ground. There's a whole bunch of slag glass and a high lead content in the sediments of the stream here. And so this represents a lead furnace from the early 1800s, late 1700s. The map that describes this is from 1828, and it's called the Old Lead Furnace or Old Slag Furnace. So this is at least 200 years old. And if you looked at this on the ground, it doesn't look like anything if you don't know it's there. And then obviously on Google Satellite, it's just forest. There's nothing. So we're picking out some pretty fine details here. You also have the option to do a multi-directional hillshade. I don't tend to use this anymore. This might be good for, I don't know, I kind of don't prefer it anymore. It can be good for some scenes, but we'll change our exaggeration back to 1. You can see an example of it here. It gives it a little bit too much of the crinkled up tinfoil look or elephant skin that I don't really prefer. Little depression there. I've never noticed that before. Yeah, it's always fun. It's always new. I've spent hours poring over this area. I've got a much larger digital elevation model of this area. I've spent hours poring over it. I'm always noticing new things. It's all part of the search. So in this view, I'm noticing something else. Our lead smelter was over here. You can see some linear features here. These lines with some roads running to them. Probably some type of feature here. We'll turn multi-directional off. I'm going to turn this back to 45. And our sun direction, we'll go about 315. That's close enough. Let's see if we can't pick out any other features here. Oh, okay, down here. We've got some more kind of linear features around here. Those look like ag fields to me. And they were ag fields, I know that. I'm very familiar with this area. This right here, these linear features here, those might be geological, those might be rocks. But I'm not entirely positive because if you'll see, this is rock outcrop here. You're seeing layers of sedimentary rocks outcropping here. And these appear to kind of cut across. They're very straight and linear. So this might have been an ag field as well. You'll see this circular feature here. I've noticed that in previous examples whenever I've been studying this, and it's pretty large. Let's measure it. Measure line, let's put it in feet because I'm an American. Unfortunately, I still think in feet. That's pretty good size, 40 feet across. I don't know if this was maybe an old silo or something. Could have been. Um, I don't really see any prominent roads going to it, but it is close to this kind of ag field area. So maybe this was an ag field and that was a silo. I don't know, some type of round structure. We're going to go up to another area. So here you'll notice this is a pretty prominent road. This was a historical road. This has been here for a very long time, but it was expanded years ago using a bulldozer, unfortunately. Well, or fortunately, because it's very prominent on the landscape now. But you see a lot of roads or paths running through here. And that's leading down to another kind of trapezoidal ag area. I don't know if this was crop fields or an enclosure. But yeah, you can just kind of follow paths and roads, try and find interesting things. Here's an example here. So I have the road that's coming down to the river, and I've got some other roads here. You notice the road goes around something here. I'm not really seeing it. Do you see anything here? I don't see anything here. That might be worth investigating a little closer. I'm maybe seeing a square shape here. So I played around with my settings earlier, so I can do this a little bit more quickly. I'll change this to 70 degrees. All right, so just by changing my sun angle, you can see as I turn it around, there we go, that's not bad either. Seeing four sides here with a road leading to it and going around, and maybe a back access road down to some ag fields. I'll go back to my previous value. That's pretty good. So yeah, you can see these four sides here, and this was an old structure. I don't know if it was a dwelling, a cabin, if you will. But there are remains of some stones from foundation, and as well as some basically, I'll call it artifacts, but it was trash. There was some trash here, so somebody spent some time here. But I just found it, just following these paths, playing around with the sun, and finding different features. There's an interesting one up here. See some mounds in this valley? These small mounds. And I did investigate these last time I was out on this property, and I'm not entirely confident what they are. They might be geological. This could just be some large boulders under the soil. I don't know. There was Native American activity here. They could be mounds down here in this creek bottom. Really hard to tell, but they looked odd, so they really stuck out to me. Let's see if we can pick out any other interesting features here. Really seeing the one of the other features I was hoping to pick up. There's an old stone foundation back here that barely shows up on the LiDAR, but it's pretty fantastic in person. Oh, here's a good example. This appears, I don't know if this could be another ag field. It's got some paths going through it, paths going next to it. We've got a linear feature going this length here. And we'll turn on Google Satellite. And you can see now it just represents forest. We've got a road, a backcountry road that's still in use here. You absolutely would not know this was here unless you take the trees away and develop this elevation model. We've got these other visualizations that we used before. That visualization for archaeological topography, it can be useful. We'll go back to our lead smelter here. You can see it's not the same kind of output as a elevation model. It's a little less intuitive. This isn't super clear here, but this can be useful, especially roads. Good God, look how much these stand out. So it can be helpful for maybe picking up some roads that you could follow and maybe try and find some other features. And then we need the other visualizations. I don't use a sky view factor very often. Don't use openness very often. You can play around with the settings on this as well to try and pick out features. But what I do like is DME, which is distance from mean elevation. You can see this kind of like flattens the landscape, almost looks like old style mappy. You can see it, that stands out pretty well there. I would notice this black dot like from space. Okay, I can see that there. So it can be really helpful for picking out some of these features. And once again, it really highlights road networks. Looks like we have an ag field here, and different features like that. So that's how you use the products that you spent all that time learning how to develop. And this process goes really fast once you know what you're doing. It takes me, I don't know, less than 30 minutes to get to this point, from downloading data, processing time, everything. It goes pretty quick. So yeah, you can use this to pick out features, and I'd recommend going out and actually putting some boots on the ground and investigate some of these, because sometimes it turns out to be something, and sometimes it, like our mounds down here, sometimes it turns out to maybe not be anything. But nonetheless, it's a good way to find features, and I think it's a lot of fun. So this is the end of this series. I might do. I'm sure I'll do some more topics in the future. I might have another. Oh, I am going to have a follow-up video to this. So I'll just end with this. If you have gotten frustrated at this point trying to download all the softwares, all the plugins, figure out the dependencies. Maybe your data was in, maybe your point cloud was in feet and you had to convert it to meters. If you're having trouble figuring out all of this, I'm going to show you how to kind of skip basically all of these steps and still get pretty close to the same product that you can use with just some simple steps. So in my next video, I will cover that and maybe show its shortfalls. You don't have as much control over the process, but it's still a lot more useful than just a simple hillshade viewer like a Caltopo or any of those type apps. So that will be in the next video. Thank you for watching.